Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this narration of the web series Solo Apocalypse. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 40. A single step was enough to say goodbye to the twilight sky. We wasted no time in leaving the sleepy wood, taking our rewards, items, and everything else before pushing through that prismatic portal. There was a subtle sense of displacement before the world reasserted itself. The constant buzz of insects, the humid warmth, and the new surroundings slid into clarity. It was a welcome change in atmosphere. Better this than the feeling of constantly being watched. And even though I was ready for him, having seen him keeping watch through third, I found myself giving Jack a tight grin, Barker, Rickson, and Rose in tow. We all but collapsed coming out, barely managing to stay on our feet. "About time," he said, grinning. He took one look at us and was already moving, concern etched across his face. "What happened? Serious injuries? We'll live." Barker gave a heavy smile, to which Rose and I hummed our agreement. None of us looked particularly well, which Jack immediately picked up on. "Crap. Let's get you situated then," Jack said. "You look like you've been through hell." "We have," I replied, exhausted. From there, it wasn't long until we were escorted to the semi-permanent structures that were erected by Ralph and his people. Rose and Parker looked around in tired awe. It was amazing what people could do if given the motivation. They were actual buildings constructed of wood, insulated with an assortment of shrubbery and leaves. There was resourceful people amongst the survivors, even without skills. I was just as impressed the first time seeing it. We were shown to a large basins of water nearby these structures where we could rinse off the worst of the gore. Jack introduced us to a healer, a woman with the first aid skill, who treated for the worst of our injuries with surprised efficiency. "Well, none of you should be doing anything strenuous for a few weeks," she was saying. "Between the three of you, 2 concussions, 2 instances of fractured ribs, internal bruising, countless lacerations, cuts and scrapes, sleep deprivation, and extreme fatigue. The Sleepywood looks like it took its namesake from you. Get some sleep. Shut-eye, the fastest road to recovery." She sighed, and I picked up on her surface thoughts. "So these are the ones Gary and Jack were talking about. I wonder what level they are. They look like they've been through it." Her eyes took in our injuries. Jack blinked at us. I just trust it was worth it," he asked, staring at us. We all gave him tired smiles, faint but triumphant. That was enough for him. When it was time to finally rest, I tuned into that frequency of my mind, using telepathy as a gauge to sense anyone nearby. It was incredibly easy to swap myself out with no one the wiser, leaving a clone in my midst and slipping into the soul space that was Solo's sanctuary. Solo's sanctuary was just as I'd left it, tranquility born from glass and black marble, hints of green plants poking out from planters in the wall, soft lighting, modern, simplistic, and beautiful. A muted space, free of worry. I would have been tempted to retreat here, but things weren't so simple. As far as I was aware, I entered and exited the sanctuary in the exact same place. If I left the group to hide in the sanctuary, leaving my clones to them, then upon exiting I'd be stranded. If one of those clones died, only my original self could renew him. That wasn't to mention the cushion I provided as another body, particularly one with a decent physical stats. More than that, though, the skill had been recharging. I couldn't have stayed here long even if I wanted to, not for days at a time. It was a reprieve, not a solution, but one which I gladly indulged. I stepped into the sanctuary from the front door. It felt the most natural, despite the sureness I could have materialized anywhere within the sanctuary. There, I made my way across the living room, through the bedroom, and into the bathroom. And finally, the shower. I undressed, tossing the filthy clothes into the shower floor, hanging my spider silk backpack on a hook nearby. It was the only thing I could think about ever since being doused in moonlight blood. A shower, a blessing amidst this hell. Skill, Solo Sanctuary. A personal space tied to the soul from which one may enter or exit. The size, design, and amenities are directly reflected on one's travel, abilities, and inclination. The sanctuary may only be entered by the owner. I wondered what part of the skill afforded running water. This quality of life. Was it a certain level of allowed a bathroom here? or the fact that I simply really appreciated a nice shower. Nonetheless, I let the clear water wash the rest of the grime off, sloughing away like caked mud. I carefully undid my bandages, hesitant and curious. Blinking through the stream of hot water, I saw only healthy flesh, my skin clearer than before. The aches were fading now, the worst of my bruises dull pangs. The small lacerations and cuts gained from the raining debris or random shrubbery were long gone. The symbiote was effective, even now, but it took its toll. I was exhausted beyond belief. The shower calmed my mind, and I took the moment to glance at my stats, eyeing the haphazard distribution. Name Evan Winst, level 25. Title, Trailblazing Vanquisher of the Hive Mind. Traits, Regenerator, Class Solo. Strength 20, Constitution 31, Dexterity 19, Agility 20, Perception 21, Intelligence 20 plus 5, Wisdom 27 plus 5, Willpower 29 plus 5, Charisma 14 plus 5, and Luck 14. Stat points 2. Skills, Never Alone, Low Profile, Silo's Instinct, Solo Sanctuary, and Telepathy. Somehow, I could trace where I placed everything. The 18 stat points I'd saved there were all thrown into the physical stats. 4 into Strength, Constitution, Dexterity, and Agility. 2 into Perception. It felt like a loss, but maybe that was the hoarder in me. An instinct I had even before the apocalypse, to hold on to what was valuable and precious, in case I'd ever lose it again. I'd done the math a while ago, allocating my stats for the purpose of Never Alone, resulting in linear growth, in terms of stats. That was all well and good, if not for the limits of each individual clone, which represented a unique dilemma. If the Twilight Elemental or Root Mother Hivemind, for example, were equated to a bear, then even 1,000 ants would do little to harm it. That would be for the case of allocating my points towards my clones, countless copies of myself, though weak physically. On the other hand, striking a balance wherein I invest my physical stats would cut the number of clones, but make each individual stronger. Rather than 1,000 ants, there is instead be, say, 100 rats. It sounded better, initially. There was, obviously, more to consider for each side. Much more. I didn't think that there was a right answer, nor was there a wrong one. I recognized the benefits and demerits of both paths. My Trailblazing Vanquisher of the Hivemind title gave me an incredible boost that helped me along both paths, which was a boon. It was a personal preference, but truthfully, I couldn't discount the utility of sheer numbers. I was a little bit disappointed that I hadn't gotten another solo class skill. I'd been holding out for another defining skill that might merit the allocation of stat points to a particular attribute, similar to Never Alone. I'd leveled twice from level 23 and gotten nothing but extra stat points. It didn't really matter anymore though, since I'd allocated just about everything I had saved up. I suppose I should be happy with just that if leveling worked the way that I thought it did. We killed an area boss, and I'd only leveled twice, which should be telling. My progress was bound to slow down. I could only imagine how much Parker, Rose, and Rickson did. I was too tired to think of more, and focused on the feeling of running water. Once I was done, I took the towel off the wall and dried off. Then, without ceremony, I found my way to my bed, low to the ground and cool. It wasn't far off to say I passed out as soon as I found its embrace. Sweet oblivion took me, my body spreading over the mattress. I woke up blissfully, taking in my sanctuary, closing my eyes and seeing the world outside as well. I spent the better part of a day resting in my sanctuary, poking at its limits, trying to understand the skill, resting. My clones couldn't access this place, only my original self was granted that ability. Regardless of my clones' apparent abilities to use other skills, Sanctuary, however, was also as useful to store things, something I discovered that made my spider silk backpack obsolete. I'd been able to partially access it like some interdimensional inventory, and I'd shoved my rewards through. I stared at the scarce twilight chest. It glowed and burnished orange, a separate illumination entirely apart from the moonlight it emitted, glowing silver as well. It was ornate, as these odd chests were, that implied promise of valuables within. I had nudged it into my sanctuary without even thinking, so tired that I'd been. I sat on my couch, looking at it in the plush carpet of my living room, along with everything else I'd reaped from the dungeon. Without further ado, I opened the last chest of the Sleepywood. I clicked open, and it was only a single item resting on the silver silk. But somehow, I could already sense the value of it, beyond anything I'd attained from staying a mere Ifrit. Item: Hard Light Shelter. A consumable item that instantly produces a semi-permanent structure made of solid moonlight. The resultant structure is affected by intelligence, constitution, and strength. The shelter takes shape as one wills it, but it will dissipate if not fueled with energy. I cocked my head to the silver disc. Well, that's not exactly what I was expecting, I said. I picked it up, feeling it rather conspicuous button. Huh. Weird. Oddly, I'd been expecting something fantastical, but this was more technological. It looked like a piece of sci-fi themed around light. I hummed, trying to parse what I knew about the apocalypse. If magic was on the table, then was everything? I wasn't sure. I put the hard light shelter aside and considered the items I'd received from the Sleepywood. The Twilight Saber, twinkling metal on a lethal edge, the Twilight Wand, a beautifully carved wooden thing, a mana light potion that gave bonuses to mana regeneration and potency under the moonlight, a silk root sash, shroom shade seeds, and a slew of miscellaneous items that didn't serve a particular purpose to me. Certainly, though, I could use them to barter for things, or perhaps I could just hoard them. Not all of the rewards were combat-oriented, which was telling. Some were just useful, like the hard light shelter. Others weren't even that, like the shroom shade seeds, which, as far as I could tell, were just the seeds for some type of mushroom. But those weren't the only things I'd gotten. That book that Solo's instinct had alighted upon, of moving symbols and slippery words. I took that out and glanced at it for as long as it took for my eyes to strain. There was something about the scratched into brain, a piece of alien literature. There were also the flowers, the silver petals that drank the moonlight, sparkling with something of the stars. I considered them for a moment, wondering if the plants which had sprouted from the twilight elemental starlight blood had any uses. In the end, there really was no way to be certain. I shrugged, replanting them into the wall of my sanctuary, accenting the greenery with pops of silver. They took easily to the shallower plants along the walls, a light mist spraying over them from the walls, watering the greenery. I hummed, looking at the installation, then looking around the sanctuary. My life had drastically changed over the course of the last month. It was incredibly ironic that this sanctuary was nicer than my previous apartment. How exactly was this all possible? Even the kitchen had a working stove and fridge, regular electrical appliances as a result of an inexplicably foreign power. The strange and alien system, somehow all of it was in its power. The past month, it wasn't something I had time to really ponder, nor did most people, I imagined. But if my entire reality was flipped upside down, the system was the only fundamental aspect of life that had changed, like the addition of another force of gravity. The system permeated everything. It was enough for me to be sure. Whatever the advent of this apocalypse meant, the system was at the core of it. Elsewhere, one of my clones looked up as a crowd of people approached the dungeon entrance. End of chapter. I would quickly like to thank our Tier 5 patrons and channel members: Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Lord Archicol, Dragzoon WRE, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.